right. Steve, you set for us, or should we move it on here?
I'm here.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get your take first and foremost. Whether you want to take this from a big picture or whatever it is, what are your initial takes, which of course are 4 days ago from this one?
Well, I think as an Ohio State fan, you got to be happy that your team gutted out the win. I think that's the first thing that really kind of comes to mind is, and it's better to learn whatever lessons that there are through a victory as opposed to a defeat. So I think that's probably the number one thing. They live to fight another day, but they're going to have to play much better if they're going to beat the likes of Penn State, Michigan, whoever they might play in a college football playoff. They're just some areas. I think defensively they were outstanding. The defense wore down and gave up a couple long touchdown drives there in the second half, but otherwise was truly outstanding. I think the pass coverage by the secondary was about as good as it could possibly get. Their tight ends made a few plays, but otherwise the defense was outstanding. Offensively, I'm sure we'll get into all the whole Lou Holtz and Ryan Day flap about toughness and physicality and everything else. But, two ways to look at this. They punched it in at the end of the game when they needed to, and they didn't punch it in when it was 3rd and 1, 3rd and goal at the 1, 4th and goal at the 1, or 4th and 1 at the 11-yard line. They didn't convert any of those three. But the final drive, 15 plays, 65 yards, was one of the great drives in Ohio State history, certainly, to win a game on the road against a top 10 team. There's very few drives that kind of match that. Maybe what Joe Germain did against Arizona State in the 1997 Rose Bowl would be similar. Arch Leister did it against UCLA at the LA Coliseum back in 79, maybe. It was it's very rare to have a game end on a drive like that produces a touchdown that wins the game. And that's exactly what happened on Saturday at Notre Dame as Ohio State got out of there with the 17-14 win. And, you could say Notre Dame outplayed Ohio State. You could say Ohio State outplayed Notre Dame. It was a virtual standoff. We've been sitting here any number of times saying Ohio State outplayed Clemson in 2019 and didn't win the game. And they outplayed Georgia last year in the Peach Bowl semifinal and didn't win the game. Guess what? They won the game. They came away with more points and they won the game. So that's all that matters in the final analysis.
Kevin, your takeaway.
Yeah, we don't talk about the 59 minutes and however many seconds of Holy Buckeye where it wasn't that exciting of a game or whatever. We talk about the Holy Buckeye pass. I mean, so it's going to be a game that's going to live on forever for fans in terms of coming back and really seemingly snatching victory out of the jaws of defeat the way that they did. I don't know if things are going to be remembered of the smaller minutia, but as Steve put it, there certainly is a lot of concern when it comes down to their 3rd and short, their 4th and short. I think the defense played very well. Maybe there were some moments that the linebackers would like to certainly have back there. Ohio State kept Audric Estime very much in check, in my opinion. Really, we did not see this Sam Hartman that everybody had kind of talked about leading into it, how prolific. I mean, he looked good throwing the ball around, but he only had the one touchdown pass. Ohio State did a pretty good job of locking guys down. Denzel Burke really was not tested in the game as Notre Dame was not going to have any of that. As we go through it, a lot to still build off of, but you have to imagine that the amount of confidence that so many players coming out of this game, that level has got to be so high. And I think that this open week comes at a really good time because you don't get drunk off of the high of that game and have the risk of a letdown against, a Maryland team that is taking care of everything in front of it. Maybe not the most impressive Maryland team out there, but, I think everything fits.
Yeah, I think nobody has ever played their best game in a 17-14 win or loss. And that's what this was. And nobody's ever played their best game against a quality, very good opponent. There's going to be some give and take there. I do think Notre Dame gave the game away, but credit Ohio State for taking it. We've seen games that have been tried to be given away by opponents, and it's not taken. But Ohio State made the plays when they had to have them. As Steve said, that drive is going to live forever. And really, there are only a handful of drives that we could even think about. You know, like JT Barrett against Penn State. You know, pick a year, I guess, would be in there as well, maybe. But you know, this was, for one, I'll say, just if you ever get a chance to go to a game at Notre Dame, do it, especially a big game, preferably a big game. If you can, you know, if you have an extra kidney and you feel like you don't need it, go ahead and sell that on the black market and get yourself one ticket, because that's probably all you'll be able to get with that kidney. No offense. But you know, it was a fun game to watch, a game that teams made mistakes, and you know, it's still September, so nobody's going to be perfect at this point. Overall, Ohio State did what they needed to do. As you guys said, it builds confidence. It's an impressive win to win on the road against a top 10 opponent when you didn't play your best game. So I think there's something there as well. They're good enough to do that. And there's still a ton of issues. Yeah. The running game, short yardage. Kyle McCord could have had several interceptions in this game, and he ended up with 0. So a better opponent will be able to capitalize, but this should be the worst that Ohio State plays from this point forward.
That's a really good point. I think that makes kind of makes it all crystal clear that this needs to be the starting point. You know, whatever happened prior to this, you know, somewhat immaterial, because it was 3 really poor opponents, and they needed to jump off from here. And they need to take this week to heal up, because that was a rugged physical game. Ohio State didn't substitute really on either side of the ball. They went with basically the same 11 people throughout, with a couple of exceptions here and there. I think for Kyle McCord, this was a coming-of-age type moment, his 5th start. And the last thing I'll say is our photographer, Dan Harker, was speaking to an usher who's worked there for over 20 years, and he said the end of that game was the loudest that usher had heard it for any game at Notre Dame Stadium, and that takes in all the Michigan down to the wire games, all the Clemson down to the wire games, Georgia down to the wire, et cetera, that they've had there in the last 20 years. And he said that it was as loud as it's been. And of course, Notre Dame is dying for a winner. I mean, you know, the era of Lou Holtz and Newt Rockne and Ara Parseghian and all those great coaches and all those great teams and Heisman winners, that all ended in 1993. And, you know, people argue, you know, oh, Notre Dame is this, Notre Dame is that. Well, since 1993, Ohio State's won 13 New Year's Six bowl games and 2 national championships. Notre Dame in each category is 0-0. So, you know, that'll just tell you, you know, how they sensed that their breakthrough moment was there and they didn't get it. So it was quite a scene. I agree with Tony. I hadn't been there since 1996. Everything had changed quite a bit. The stadium didn't used to have so much stuff built around it. There are new buildings all around it, and you know, a lot of things built up there, and very impressive. Everything. The only thing I'll say is when I was walking out back to our car, about a 3/4 of a mile walk, it looked like a war zone. They had apparently the Notre Dame fans are of such class that they just leave their trash everywhere. So I will say that.
It was
no trash cans.
It was like a tornado hit Woodstock, and
yes,
the amount of beer, or maybe a country fest, you know, whatever. What, you know, Ohio State has, Columbus has those.
Rock on the Range. Yeah,
there was trash everywhere.
Everywhere.
And, just you couldn't drive. I wouldn't recommend driving through that because of all the glass bottles, the mini liquor bottles. I was not taken aback because I'm from Ohio. I was surprised at the level of crassness that we experienced in South Bend, and not unwelcome at all. It wasn't exactly what I had pictured.
Crassness. Can you give us an example?
Well, when we went to grab lunch on Friday at a particular place called the Linebacker Inn, the Linebacker Lounge, you were greeted with the waitress or the bartender yelling, "What's up, effers?" Except using the full language and things like that, and so just stuff like that. And then, of course, like I said, the amount of empty alcohol bottles and cans would make an Ohioan blush, basically.
Was this
And
greeting given to everyone or people that had Ohio State gear on?
Well, we
everyone,
did a piece. Yeah, everyone. We did a Hungry Hungry Huddle piece, which is on youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. And if you go and you watch it, you can see the shirt that the waitress is wearing. I mean, they were very nice to us.
yes,
I mean, we got
awesome.
some Notre Dame Guinness glasses to take home. It was, I think it was just kind of the shtick. Anybody who's from Chicago probably knows a place called Ed DeBevick's,
Mm-hmm.
where the shtick is to be kind of surly, but going in, and it was fine. I think that just the air that I got like leading up to the game, there was a lot of confidence in the Notre Dame types. I mean, I knew a couple that are like, yeah, I'm not feeling so good about this, but most were, dare I say, kind of Michael Campbell level committed to the Kool-Aid, and that's where we were at.
And those were my two main issues with not all Notre Dame fans, but the unreasonable Notre Dame fans leading up to this. And for the last 7 months, one, the ones that guaranteed a win. Now, I would jump on Ohio State fans if I saw that out of Ohio State fans. I think it's just idiotic to guarantee a win. And what is the penalty when your guarantee doesn't come through? What does that look like? So that's just a stupid thing to do, especially against a program that has been decidedly better than you for 30 years. And that's the other point that irritated me over the last 7 months was Notre Dame fans making up all sorts of like crazy skewed like pockets of information of, for the first 4 minutes of this game over here, we outrushed you by 18 yards or something. Like, are you kidding me? Notre Dame's had a better record twice in 30 years. It's not even comparable. And this doesn't reflect on you as a person. Detach yourself and your value from your college football team. You can root for a team and say, hey, we're a top 10 team. We haven't been elite for a long, long time. We love our history. All these great things about Notre Dame and its history, but you just haven't been that for 30 years. And that's okay.
But
Two quick things: 73% of all stats are made up on the spur of the moment, and secondly, talking about guarantees and everything else, I had been pretty vocal in my belief that Ohio State was not only going to win but win handily. Well, the win happened, the handily not so much, and I was recognized multiple times by Notre Dame types and called out, including with about 3 minutes left in the game or so, when Ohio State could not once again convert a shorty. And I just said, I've seen enough. And I was like, I'm going up to the post-game room to get my shot ready and everything else. And right next to the tunnel, there are a bunch of fans like, you're that Ohio State guy from the podcast. And I mean, but this was about the third time that I'd been called out. So, fortunately, there are a lot of people that seem to be a big fan of the voice of college football, or at least saw bits and pieces enough to call my ass out.
we grabbed pizza at a place Friday night in just off campus there, and just me and Kevin at a kind of a dive bar type place, and two guys come up and they're like, "You're the guy that said Notre Dame is full of nobodies, aren't you?" And Kevin, tries to play it off, but yeah, that's me.
I mean, if I had to stay there another day, I was going to probably need security.
I had no problems. I got in and out under the cloud of darkness and didn't try to go out and do a whole lot. Just kind of, every time we go to places like this, I'm going to go see the sights. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to go do that. And then I end up staying in my hotel room, getting dinner at a place that's not necessarily associated with the university. not walking around campus and, just going to the game, doing my job and getting the heck out of there. So that's kind of that was what my formula was this time.
Steve,
Maybe the next.
my cloud of darkness was Kevin. And
The-
so one other thing that Noon did was at the place, the linebacker lounge in you can play touch tunes. So you can play whatever song you want on your phone, like, and you can play it on the jukebox. And he's like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to play Hang On Sloopy. And unfortunately, like, he played it, but nobody really recognized it as an Ohio State thing. Then I was going to play, I want to go back to Ohio State. But then I was talked out of it by Kevin and Tom, because they were chicken that somebody might get stabbed and it might be them.
Just make sure you were my collateral damage.